Special Interest Friday today, and you're in for a treat, I believe. So we welcome each of you, and I had this long welcome for you, but because we are about 15 minutes late, I am going to say to you that you probably already know a lot about the Virginia Caples Lifelong Learning Institute, but it is the entity that conducts or organizes, and it's the conduit for the classes and special interest Fridays that you will be able to participate in. You're participating in today, and as you will do throughout this time. This is our second full year and of offering these courses. I think we're closer to the third semester that we have offered the courses. And some of our special interest Fridays, we might be on a field trip. Another one might be as you are having a forum here today, or any kind of interesting topic that we think the public might be interested in, and especially if they're over 50, our seniors. So that's what we're trying to do through our Virginia Caples Lifelong Learning Institute. So I welcome you this morning, and I won't take up any more of our time since we're about 15 minutes late. Okay, Constance.
Trying to keep myself from blocking out the camera. Good morning again.
Good morning.
When we decided that we wanted a series that would cover hot issues and current issues and relevant topics, we sat around the table and said, well, how will we choose them? We're kind of choosing them just from what we hear other people talking about. And one of the issues that is a big issue and dear to my heart is how downtowns have transformed. I was a professor of city planning here on campus. So the planning director downtown is my student. The lady in the, she's one of my former students is also an assistant director in community development. So I have little transplants all over the city who I hope are remembering that the stamp that we try to put on them at A&M is that you leave here not only knowing the practices and skills of being a planner, but you overlay that with a high sense of social consciousness. And so you just don't go do planning as it's always been done, you do planning with some sensitivity. And so one of the hot spots for me is how land has transformed out of hands. When you look at cities throughout the country, some of the most valued real estate in any city is the downtown area. And when you think about who sat there many decades ago, it was communities of color. And so for us to go back and remember that, and I had gone up and asked some planning students, so I had one planning student, thanks Jay, I had asked planning students to come because you need to understand these phenomena and not just think that this is how things are supposed to happen. They oftentimes happen with an agenda. But I want us to kind of remember and recast and value what we had so that maybe we can retool people to not let go or either stay and hold it out. Because sometimes we're forced out and we understand that, but we ought to appreciate our roots in history. So that's what today's presentation is all about. Sit back and enjoy, and I thank the panel for sitting here and enlightening us. The other big reason for doing this is that probably, what do you say, about 65% of folks who live in Huntsville are transplants.
Oh, sure.
So,
More.
and so if you've been here like me, I've been in Huntsville 40 years now, and that's a long time. But when you think about most people don't have an appreciation of the history of this place, a forum like this is very, very important. And so that was the other reason for holding it. Those of us who were not born and bred here need to appreciate this place that we now call home.
Okay, I'm Tommie Batts. We'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come and present today about our hometown, Huntsville, Alabama. I'd also like to thank the panelists for agreeing to participate, and all of my Huntsvillians, as I am, and I've known them almost all of my life. Carolyn Parker, who was we attended the same high school, and when I was growing up, it was Carolyn Haygood and Michael Smith before he became Dr. Michael Smith. He was Michael and Kenneth's brother, and Mady's son, and Reverend Lockhart before she was Reverend Lockhart, she was Earla Lockhart. Each will introduce themselves in a few minutes, and then we'll go ahead and I'll give a brief history of Huntsville, and then we'll open it up for them to make their presentations. Again, I'm Tommie Batts. I was born really at the corner of Bobway Lane and Pulaski Pike a few years ago, and at the age of 3, we moved to Caples Street over near the hospital, what is now the hospital, and at the age of 5, we moved to Steel Street, downtown Huntsville, which is now Old Town. Carolyn?
Okay, I'm Carolyn Parker, as we say, Carolyn Haygood. I have this joke with Michael. He calls me to tell me stuff, and I tell my husband, I say, now, if Michael says Carolyn Haygood call me, I gotta call him if I don't do anything else, 'cause he knows he needs to tell me something that's important. But anyway, I was born and raised downtown Huntsville, Sprague Street. Many of you probably know Tommie Batts, a dear friend of mine. He and I have this thing about Sprague Street is not where it was. Because once everything was reconfigured, it's kind of around the corner some kind of way. That's not Sprague Street. Sprague Street I grew up on. I have another dear friend who ended up moving to, this is part of my presentation. I guess I'm just going to introduce myself, right? Okay, just introduce yourself. All that presentation. Carolyn Parker. Okay, went to Council High. Graduated there, stayed on Sprague Street, came to A&M, day student. It was good I could go to college, you know. It's one of those things where staying on campus was not an option. So I graduated from here at Alabama A&M in, I'm dating myself, 1965, and married right out of school. So I was on Sprague Street until I married. And well, okay, I'll just say another little bit. I did end up a teacher, starting out at Sparkman, UH, A&M, well, my last 13 years here at A&M Johnson. I did a lot of stuff, fun stuff. I loved every minute of it. But that's enough for now.
I'm Michael Smith, native Huntsvillian, and I will tell you more as I talk later.
I'm Earla Lockhart. I'm a native Huntsvillian as well. I grew up in the 10th Calvary Hill community, but had a lot of interaction with downtown. And as the crow flies, it was only about 1.5 miles, and we walked it and didn't think anything about it. So I'll tell you more later on.
Okay. What I'd like to do now is just give you a brief history of Huntsville and I guess some statistics and that type thing. This is the boring part, and then they'll get into the exciting part. Twickenham was incorporated in 1809 as part of the United States Mississippi Territory. And, when the boundaries of the town were established back then, Holmes Avenue, which the area we discussed today, were basically the northern edge of the city. The city was so small that was the northern edge. In 1811, the town of Twickenham was renamed Huntsville, Alabama. And and this is before it became, before Alabama became a state. After Alabama entered the Union as a state in 1819, Huntsville became its capital. And the town grew and the city limits expanded a little bit further north. And it was so strange because when we were kids and we'd leave Steel Street and head to the country, when we got to Oakwood Avenue, we were out of town, we were in the country. But fast forward to 1950, the area of downtown Huntsville, Holmes Avenue, Spraggins, as Carolyn had mentioned, Jefferson and Church Street, the area that we'll be concentrating on in our presentations today, became somewhat of a mecca for blacks in Huntsville, Madison County, and neighboring cities, and and those that lived around it every day and every weekend. This area, which included a few city blocks, obviously had no zoning restrictions because a little bit of everything was there. But it was anchored by 5 black churches. And these churches included Lakeside Methodist Church, which was located on Jefferson Street in 1866. St. John's African Methodist Episcopal Church, which was located on Church Street in 1900 after it was started in a barbershop by William Hooper Council in 1885. That was on West Holmes Street when it started the barbershop. And Church Street Cumberland Presbyterian Church, located on Church Street in 1909, after being established in 1874 as the first colored Cumberland Presbyterian Church. And Phillips Christian Methodist Episcopal Church was located on Church Street in 1922. And First Missionary Baptist Church, which was, when I was growing up, was called First Baptist Church, was located on Church Street in 1922 after relocating from Steele Street, where it was established on Steele Street in 1881. We would also be remiss if we didn't mention that St. Bartlett Church, which was not in that particular area, but a few blocks south of us, really it started in where the hospital is in 1822, but later moved after the Civil War, moved further north. But in 1822, the first female journalist in the United States came through Huntsville and mentioned mentioned Huntsville African Baptist Church, which later became St. Bartlett Church, that was pastored by a highly respected colored Huntsville minister. And we're talking about 1822, even before during slavery and before emancipation of proclamation. But William Harris had founded and organized the original, and he was the original pastor of the church, later, as I mentioned, later known as St. Bartlett's African Baptist Church. In 1821, that church had 76 members, a number of which were free people, free blacks, and some of them who were slaves. William Harris served as the first elder of the church, and Barton Harris, his grandson, was the second. Not only this area, excuse me, not only this area of town housed churches, but it also included a variety of black-owned businesses that operated as restaurants, funeral homes, barber shops, beauty shops, shoe shine parlors, shoe shops, nightclubs, radio and TV repair, grocery stores, fish markets, newspaper, print shop, dentist, lawyer, gas station, auto repair, rooming houses, cab stands, cleaners, and these are all illegal establishments. We're not even mentioning the illegal establishments in that area. And it used to baffle me, as an adult, when I look back at that, it's how all those businesses could have been in that little area. It also included a library, community center, and single-family homes, which, as Carolyn mentioned, she stayed over there. All of these business, churches, and homes and other operations fit in those blocks, along with some white-owned businesses. In 1940, the Huntsville population was 13,050 people. And if you look at the fact that we were at that time of between 15-20%, you can say that there's probably 2,000 black folks. That's why we knew all of it. Everybody knew each other. In 1941, Redstone Arsenal came to Huntsville and population began to grow. In 1950, there was 16,437 people in Huntsville and about 3,000 blacks. In 1960, there was 72,000. So you can see in 10 years, it grew from 16,000 to 72,000. In 1960, there was 72,365 people in Huntsville and about 14,000 black folks. In 1970, it had grown to 139,282, and so it was probably around 22,000 black folks. And this is just a capsule view of Huntsville's history to set the stage for our presenters, to provide you their experience in growing up in Huntsville and being associated with this environment, the effect it had on them, and why it should be remembered. And Michael's going to have to leave early to go to a funeral, so he will begin.
Now, I am not here to remember downtown Huntsville. I am here to restore it. I want you to take these numbers so you can call me a battle. 256 427-5000. That's the City Hall number. Ask for Mayor Battle's office. Devin Keith is the city councilman. He's 256-427-5011. And my question is, why are they demolishing Scruggs Street Community Center? Why are they demolishing the former black swimming pool? Why have they demolished almost every historic African-American monument in downtown Huntsville, while the mayor pretends to be for black people? And if you'll notice, he hires black people, unlike previous mayors, who hired the Irish to be the enforcers. Under this mayor, black people are hired to enforce rule against black people. For example, why demolish Scruggs Street after Blossomwood, east of California Street, refused to have a community center in its neighborhood? They didn't want tall, gangly basketball players in their neighborhood. And so they said, no, it was quietly done. It was an item in the paper, an item at the city council meeting, but you don't have a community center in Blossomwood. Nor do you have a junior high in Blossomwood, because it sits on Adams Avenue in the middle of a black neighborhood. No black people are there now. My grandfather's property was right there at the corner of Adams and Townsend. I told the executive 50 years ago, save that property. City Hall told him you couldn't build houses on that land. The lots were too narrow. They had been building houses on that land for 100 years. So this is the kind of nonsense you get in City Hall, Huntsville, Alabama. Why is downtown lily white? They don't call it lily white, they call it exclusive. Why were individual landowners evicted and properties given to corporations? RCP, who is building that new facility right there next to Big Spring Park, on my grandfather's land among other property owners. They went to court in 1967 and forced him to sell that land for $8,000. They then turned it over to Hilton Corporation. Hilton Corporation built a hotel, ran it into the ground in 20 years, and then turned it over to Holiday Inn. They ran it farther into the ground, and then they turned it over to City Hall. So all of those big spring partners, the Sealeys, the Hiltons are back again, only now they're in council court. They call themselves Homewood Suites by Hilton. So this is how the game is going, not just against African Americans, but all Americans. So what we have in downtown Huntsville and in the nation is the return of feudalism. The whole notion that some potentate, some monarch, some entity hands over your property to somebody else, and they are allowed to do whatever they want to with it. That was feudalism. Remember, we had dukes and duchesses and barons. We had the return of feudalism in airport lands. Did you know that if you pay a certain amount of money, you don't have to wait in the airport land? Do you know that if you pay a certain amount of money in certain parts of the country, you don't have to drive a certain interstate or a certain highway? You can go to a highway only for rich people. Do you know that on your internet you will have to get behind rich people because the Ku Klux Republicans in charge of Washington have gone and gotten rid of net neutrality? Do you know that water used to be free in cafes and restaurants and bars, and now you have to pay for bottled water? Think of Flint, Michigan, and the whole notion that water, clean water, has to be paid for special, not just a tap water, where the water is good for everybody. Think of the Electoral College, where Donald Trump losing an election by 3 million voters and then plops himself in the White House and acts like he won. This is the return of feudalism. Another feature in current America is there is no free press, contrary to all that nonsense we've been listening to for the last however many years. For example, I wrote a series of letters to the Huntsville Times trying to get Councilman Showers not to allow Council Court to be destroyed, demolished. The Huntsville Times, after the first 2 or 3 letters, refused to publish anymore. Your question is, why doesn't, who has interviewed John Ahinger, editor of the Huntsville Times, John Ahinger, and asked him, why did you refuse to allow me to put the pressure on Showers? Because Showers is the one who conceded the ground, along possibly with County Commissioner Bob Harrison, State Representative Laura Hall, and other elected black officials, including the state senator Parker Griffith. Parker Griffith didn't mind Council Court being demolished because he had bought land around it, and if Council Court was gone, his land was that much more valuable. Okay, I even called wrote the Speaking Out newspaper, William Smothers, who was just dishonored the other day. They gave him some kind of honor, but he wasn't doing any honor. I tried to get him to move against the demolition of Council Court. He refused because he said to me, "You are not a subscriber to my newspaper." Now, what did that have to do with the price of cotton? And so I brought these to you to show you. Here is Speaking Out newspaper. And there is Publix ad in the paper. So this is how you buy out newspapers, including the Huntsville Times. If you get the Huntsville Times, you pay attention to those ads. Publix is among the big advertisers in that Huntsville Times. There is no law. We keep talking about the law. For example, go to the neighborhood in front of First Baptist Church on Governor's Drive, south of First Baptist, across Governor's Drive. The neighborhood is called Clerks and Paid Men Subdivision. There were more houses there. There was not always Governor's Drive. It was once upon a time called Fifth Avenue. And it was 2 lanes. And the man who sold them the property comes 10 years later and says, we're going to make it 4 lanes. We've got to move some of these houses. If that doesn't satisfy, those are European Americans. Go to New London, Connecticut. New London, Connecticut, there was a seaside neighborhood, and developers went to the mayor, city council, and said, look, if you allow us to take all those houses, we'll build you a fine, upscale, tax-paying complex. The mayor went along with it. The case went all the way to the Supreme Court. The people got mad. Some of them even took out guns going looking for the folks. Even so, their neighborhood was demolished. And now it turns out it may have been demolished prematurely because of global warming. It might be underwater soon. And that's the same thing for downtown Huntsville. You understand, you have ripped people apart for no reason, all because some crook is in the back of City Hall. And these crooks, at least in Huntsville's case, were slaveholders. People who had made their fortune on slavery and had never reparated the slaves after freedom. So what we are seeing in the United States this very day is a failure to pay the people that you stole the labor from. your vote is worthless. The people in council court voted for Richard Showers. And he then turned around and shafted them. And let me also say, Richard Showers is a deacon at Union Chapel Baptist Church. Now, that is a disgrace to them to have a man of that character as a deacon. The very idea that you would shaft your own council, your own constituents, in order to help some rich man in the back room. Your vote is worthless, as I say. Showers, and look at Trump. You had 3 million more voters voting against Trump than voted for him. And yet they put him in the White House based upon slaveholders' trickery that we still see today. Progress. They keep telling me it's progress. And progress, as they defined it, is built on the backs of black people. Everything that was done in downtown Huntsville could have been done differently with as little impact on people as possible. But if you start living off slavery, you become a drug addict. You cannot get over it. There was an abolitionist who came to Huntsville in 1832, stayed 3 or 4 months preaching against slavery. He told them, if you ever start, you will never ever finish it. And here we are 200 years later almost. And we're still living on slavery. The city is. Economic prosperity is an illusion. They keep telling you how wonderful it is we build. Listen to the news report. They're talking about construction. But they never tell you about demolition. They never tell you about degradation. You understand? They degrade your house. They put the shot house, the crack house, the cat house, the dump site next to your property. Economic prosperity is an illusion. In 1860, can you name, you here, the 10 richest states in the United States? The 10 richest states in the United States. You know what the 10 richest were? 9 of them were slaveholding states. Why were they the richest? Because they had grabbed your foreparents and monetized them, put them down as a dollar bill. The 10th state was Connecticut. Connecticut was full of cotton mills. The black people producing the cotton down here shipped it up to Connecticut. Connecticut was living off slavery and off insurance, because you know, if you could kidnap a person, you need to ensure that they will fulfill some part of their obligation. When they destroy your property, they then sell you another property worth more. So there you go, they give you a certain amount for your property, and then you go and buy a more expensive property, and where are you then? Back in debt. There is no such thing as a white race. It was just an illusion created to put up a facade to hide behind. The whole notion of white was contrived by rich people, slaveholders, to give them some help keeping these black people down. So I say we should start calling so-called white people by their tribe or by their nationality. Call them Irish, Polish, German, English, Scotch. Start calling them white people. There is no such thing as color, a race of color. The only colored race you know, and they know, the rich people know, is green. I asked you, why has there been a rise in the last 30 or more years in the use of the N-word. It's in your ear all the time. Why? Why has there been a rise in the use of the B word in your ear as you walk to your grocery, from your grocery, as you sit on your porch? My point is, it arose, I believe, the same way my letters to the Huntsville Times did not get there. Because it was all part of the notion that we are going to open it up to let black people beat up on black people. And then so many people say to you, why, it's the fashion. And the people using the word say, well, we use it with love. And I say to them, why don't you call the other people the C word? You know it's a C word. You know that, don't you? You don't hear it as much anymore, but there used to be a C word. There was an H word. But why don't you call them those words with love? Why has there risen in the last 30 years or more all of these fiefdoms in these black neighborhoods? Drive-by mass shootings. For what cause? Why would you have that? And I say it's because they have contrived the medium and the message to let you think, if you're weak-minded enough, that it's a fashion to go around shooting black people, like it was a fashion to go around calling them out of their names. Why was Kroger's on the corner of Governor's Drive and Gallatin Street evicted? They call it the Dowdle Health Center now. Go and look at that building. It's the same Kroger's that was put up about 1960. Why has Publix plopped its store in the middle of Council Court 30 years after they closed Kroger's? Why? I say we ought to boycott Publix, at least the one in Council Court. And I asked you to put it on your church bulletins, put it in your Facebook notions, that we need to do something to stop these people. It's not white people, quote unquote. It's rich people in the back room who are manipulating. Over the last 10 years or so, I have written a number of letters against Michael O. Lundy. Michael O. Lundy was the executive director of the Huntsville Housing Authority, who demolished Council Court. He was brought in because he was the only candidate, I'm told, who would agree to do so. The rich people here loved him so much they hired him. The rich people in Birmingham loved him so much they hired him down there to do the same thing. And the whole object is to send black people way out in the woods now in this cycle of economics. And your land in town that was once worthless comparatively is now going to be gloriously wealthy, rich for some people, not for you. I also hope that you will boycott all of those people in Council Court. All of those businesses. I was looking for pants, saw that there was a pants store in Council Court. Now they call it Twickenham Squared. Twickenham because it was an extension of the slave neighborhood of Twickenham. So anyway, I wrote letters to the bishops of the CME church that Tommie just talked about. I wrote letters to Larry Reddick, who grew up in Phillips Chapel on Church Street. Never heard from him. I wrote the presiding bishop down in Birmingham. I wrote the African Methodists against Michael O. Lundy, telling them this is a dangerous man. You do not want this man to come in there, because what he does is he does what the Irish used to do, hired to do, which is to demolish, degrade, remove black people. I wrote Weld newspaper. They never published it as best I know. I've written the new mayor of Birmingham, Woolfolk, a young man. I have never heard a word from him. I wrote the NAACP. in Birmingham warning them about Michael O'Lundy. I have never heard from them. However, there was a case that you may have seen and heard in the newspaper involving State Representative Oliver Robinson, who was testifying at a trial in Birmingham. And he said that he had gotten money from rich people to keep his constituents from testing their soil to see what was the toxicity, the toxins in their soil. He then turned around and gave some of the money to the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Do you get that? So the question is, why haven't these people moved to stop your demolition, your degradation? My point to you is that Huntsville, Alabama, and the United States of America, even to this day, is still living off slavery. Urban renewal became Negro removal. It became the 1830 Indian Removal Act. You know, there was an act passed by Congress to get rid of these natives. And it's the same business we're going through now. What is this, almost 2 centuries later? My further point to you is that global warming is here. All properties in downtown will become enormously valuable. A year ago, I was speaking at St. John's African Methodist, urging them to keep their church in downtown, because I told them, all you're going to be doing is 50 years later, you're going to want to come back down here and the price will be sky high. It's a game. And I don't know if they have decided to do it or not, but I hope they will. And I hope you will urge them to. Money is God. In this United States of America, all that folderol about voting, about progress, about equality, there is no God in this country above money. If Trump sold the United States out to the Soviets, to the Russians, who can blame him? After all, it's all about money. And I keep telling people, I think slavery is coming back because, again, it was about money. It wasn't about your color, your intelligence, your morality, your whatever. It was all about money. And I'm hoping that you will call Mayor Battle, call Councilman Keith, and protest the demolition of Scruggs Street and the swimming pool, because we're going to need people back. They're coming back downtown. And it was an enormously foolish notion to put all of these structures in such a way as to drive black people out and to increase the racial tension and to increase the racial, not just racial, social isolation. Why do you have drive-by shootings? Because people are without hope. They have been told they were nothing. Last week or so, I was reading a biography of Ida B. Wells. Some of you may remember Ida B. Wells is one of those who waged a long and fierce campaign against American lynchings. At some point in her 30s, Ida B. Wells marries Ferdinand Barnett. And she died in 1931, but her granddaughter saved her autobiography that she had not been published. And the granddaughter's name was Alfreda, A-L-F-R-E-D-A. And I thought to myself, who are these? Wait a minute, we got some Barnetts around here in Huntsville. And so I went and looked at the 1865 census. I knew these Barnetts. And what did I see? But there were 2 Ferdinand Barnetts listed in Huntsville in 1865. There was another Barnett listed, Alfred. These were members of the Cumberland Presbyterian Church. And so it appears that the Ferdinand Barnett that Ida Wells married is related to these Barnetts on Barnett Street. If you go to the Scruggs Street side of the community center, there was a street over there, a lane, they called it a street, called Barnett Street. The Barnetts were members of the Cumberland Presbyterian Church and ministers of that church. So my point is, you can see that the Barnetts had a wide influence, and we in Huntsville might have a wide footprint. Now, in August of 1908, there was an item, it was in the Journal. Now, the Journal is a paper that was run by H.C. Benford. Any of you here who went to A&M in the 50s and 60s and maybe to the 70s, and if so, there was a math teacher in the math professor at A&M named Ruth Benford Carter. This is going to be her grandfather's newspaper. And on August the 27th, 1908, there was a notice in that paper, dead, Thompson, at her residence on Pelham Street, Saturday, August the 22nd, Mrs. Nancy Thompson. She was 85 years of age and a faithful member of the CP Church, the Cumberland Presbyterian Church, where her funeral was attended Sunday by Reverend C.L. Davis. Now, Nancy Thompson is my great-great-grandmother. Pelham Street is where Redstone Federal Credit Union is now putting up its bank building. That was their property. Her daughter wrote a poem that appeared in the Journal a week later. The daughter's name was Melinda, but because of the fashions of that day, women were not supposed to have their names in newspapers. She wrote a poem and she listed it as M.J. Thompson. Now, this is a poem about my great-great-grandmother and another family member in Eldridge. Now, these Eldridges are still around here today. They don't know that we're related or don't know the degree. Some of them don't know the degree. But in any case, a poem by M.J. Thompson in memory of our loved ones. Death once more our midst has entered and took 2 dear ones from our side. Though we love them very dearly, short with us has been their stay. We shall miss them, oh how sadly, words can never tell. But we know that with our darlings, all is well. Could we, would we, dare we wish them back to dwell with us again? Through these months of untold suffering, where each moment seems an hour, we would rather wait with patience till our Savior bids us come, then we will join our cherished loved ones, where all parting is unknown. We had hoped that they would recover, but God in his omniscience has ordered it otherwise, and we can but bow in humble submission to his decree, with the hope that our loved ones are other links in the chain of love that bind the earth to heaven. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.